So we find ourselves in these conversations all the time with interesting people. Today, we're talking to a man who decided that he saw this big need in what he would broadly define as elder care, and he focused on incontinence. So a couple funny things about this. One, as he states, there hasn't been a lot of innovation here. And two, he might not be the person you'd expect to walk in the door talking about this.
Not only is he a man, he's a young man. He's a really young man. And apparently the situation that he faced when dealing with elder care was really notable to him.
And really made an impact. And, like so many people that we get the chance to speak to, he turned an idea and a problem he saw and looked for a better solution. So who's coming into your office suffering from symptoms of incontinence? Based on what we learned, it sounds like it's not the stereotype that we might have in our heads.
The answer, or really the question, should be, who isn't coming into my office with this complaint? And maybe that would be the 18-year-old. But look, Rachel, this is a problem that spans the decades. There are different risk factors. So we certainly see this issue arise after having children. We see this issue arise as a result of weak pelvic floor muscles. We see it as a genetic issue. And surely we see it in the older population. But I would say this spans women from really 35 and up. So it's something that needs to be addressed, and big time.
So I'm happy we'll have a chance to learn more and hear about a solution that really seems to be making a difference in consumers' lives.
Welcome to the Business of the V. Hello, friends and colleagues. I'm Dr. Alyssa Dweck.
And I'm Rachel Braun Scherl. Each week, we bring you the most fascinating investors, inventors, entrepreneurs, academics, and healthcare practitioners who are making things happen in women's sexual and reproductive health.
If you are a woman, know a woman, have a business, or care about your V health and wellness, fasten your seatbelts and listen in to another informative and inspiring episode.
We are so happy to have our guest today, Steven Cruz, who's co-founder at Hazel, which is a terrific company that he's building that I'll tell us about. Both Alyssa and I have had the opportunity to meet and get to know Steven a little bit. Welcome.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys both. It's been great getting to know you guys, and excited to chat here.
So one of our favorite things is to look at, the journeys people take, for instance, from Microsoft to menopause. How do you go from providing, healthy, well-balanced, home-cooked meals to incontinence?
Bam.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for putting me on the spot. Like at the end of the day, right? I think, you don't choose really what you work on. It kind of chooses you. And I've always just been someone who always wanted to align myself, with mission-driven companies, whether it's something that I'm working on myself or, something that I'm a part of. And, I've been in the startup space for, over a decade at this point. And after Plated, I joined one of the Plated co-founders to go and really build new senior living solutions. So think of it as like, modern day Elks Lodge, Rotary Club, American Legion, right? Really kind of modernizing community in the 21st century. And, as you can imagine, just as a 30-something-year-old being immersed in that demo day in, day out, I started hearing new conversations, new needs, right? Particularly with women. The thing that I kept hearing over and over again was, these women were well aware of kind of new age brands that have hit the market, right? The Hims, the Romans of the world, really tackling taboo topics. But no one was really focused on, their new needs. And as you can imagine, like that just sparked interest, right? I started double clicking some more, holding user research sessions, kind of all of that. And then realized that, there is an even larger opportunity here to, service a lot of people and do good. Realize that no one was going after the bladder leakage space. It's it's a market that's been, locked since the 70s, right? And hasn't changed yet. Any other CPG category that you look at, the consumer has choice, and also it's evolved. So that's kind of the short version of how we went from delivering meal kits to, now developing our own incontinence solutions and bringing it out to the world.
Well, I have another question before we jump into incontinence, and I let Alyssa talk about all the medical specifics. So it was an interesting journey. You said, the business chose you. Help us understand how you picked when you left and you started something with your coworker from Plated. Why elder care? Was there some reason that pushed you into that particular space? And clearly, obviously, once you get talking about that, there are enormous needs, which you're working very hard to solve. But what was the pull to that?
With that business, there was a personal story behind it with that respective founder. But, at the end of the day, ahead of the COVID-19 kind of pandemic that we went through, one of the largest epidemics, right now in the US is loneliness and social isolation, right? Where, people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, about a third of them state to be, lonely and socially isolated. And the reality is digital apps or anything of that sort really don't help bridge that gap. And what we realized was no one was tackling this at all, let alone this consumer in any kind of means, right? And at the end of the day, this is a consumer that controls 70% of the GDP, right? Yet they're still being ignored. The amount of, new startups and services that I see that are focused on, Gen Z and millennials almost make no sense. So, it goes back to, again, kind of aligning my own personal mission, right? At the end of the day, I think you can combine, capitalism and good. So that's what attracted me to that. And then realized that, it wasn't just loneliness, as the only opportunity here. There's kind of much, much more. And I think the good thing is you're starting to finally see, founders tackle this, as well as the venture dollars are starting to kind of align behind it.
So, in my world, incontinence, which means the involuntary leakage of urine for people who may not be familiar with that term, is extraordinarily common. Okay, so I think the usually quoted stat is 25%. 1 in 4 women will suffer from incontinence, with the vast majority of those people being over the age of 65.
Right.
I suspect that actually there is a pretty decent number earlier than that age, but they're really not talking about it. But my question is specific. Since so many of the over 65-year-old people may not be as familiar with or adept with an online app to obtain services other than maybe Amazon, but to obtain health services, how did you navigate that so that it would be so user-friendly?
Yeah, so I guess addressing some of the misconception, right? To your point, yes, as you age, there's a higher likelihood that you do experience, call it everyday leakage. But the reality is the average age of our consumer is 48 years old. Where I think when we'll hear that for the first time, they're surprised, right? Because I think just on a societal level, we have this stigma that, anyone that's shopping this aisle is doing it on the behalf as a, caretaker, and, the end user, someone who's bedridden. And that's actually, not the truth behind it, which, really came to a surprise when we were digging into the category overall. But to your point, when we were developing the brand, developing the user experience on a digital standpoint, at the end of the day, I was always putting, the customer first. And that's where my co-founder really comes into play. Her background is brand, UX, design, all of that. And believe it or not, when she was at Zola, a wedding registry company, their primary revenue drivers were people 50 and up, right? As you can imagine, they're the ones that are actually making the big ticketed purchases off the registry. So we really approached it with just a user-centric design and, involved her in every step of the way. And, lastly, on our side, when we were, developing the brand, developing the product, and ultimately developing the digital experience, we put together an advisory board of about 25 women in demo. So they had, they had influence on kind of all parts. And at the end of the day, they're the ones building this. And, we're just the ones shepherding all of it.
So just to take it back a little bit. So let's define what incontinence is. Can you give folks a primer, Alyssa, on what are the many causes of incontinence? As Steven described, it does not fit perhaps the stereotype that we have in our mind. And it doesn't just affect, urine leakage, like many other things in health, and not that just women suffer from incontinence, but it affects so many aspects of a person's life who has to deal with this. So what are some of the causes people can look out for, and how many other aspects of someone's life does it touch?
Yeah. So actually, this is a great question because it really speaks to what you were speaking about, Steven, with the younger age demographic that you were surprised to learn about, which I'm actually not at all surprised to learn about. And that's why I had asked that question. So this is the thing. There are a couple of different types of incontinence. In a very simplistic way, we have stress incontinence, which in and of itself means that when you strain, you perform a Valsalva maneuver, like cough or sneeze or laugh really hard or do exercise. You leak just at that time and it's uncontrollable, but usually just a small amount. I see loads of this in my office, especially in the younger women who might have had children, particularly big babies or instrumented deliveries. Two independent risk factors for stress incontinence. Another type of incontinence is, what we call urge incontinence, sometimes also called overactive bladder, where for really no reason whatsoever, your bladder just decides to act without your brain's instruction, and it might have some, muscle contraction without your instructing it to do so, and you'll leak urine. Oftentimes, women get this when they say, they really have to go to the bathroom so badly. They reach for the door handle to go and urinate, and they can't make it in time. Most of the time, there's a mix of both of these. And so I think it's fair to say that there's several kinds of incontinence. With that said, risk factors include being overweight, genetic factors, pelvic floor muscle weakness that might be related to childbirth or having big babies or instrumented deliveries, and then other gynecologic issues that can go along with. It doesn't surprise me that it's women in their 40s who are really opting in here, because these are women who are incredibly active, want to maintain their exercise schedules, and are not afraid to get onto the web to manage this and have support from a community.
So given, Steven, that it affects people across an age range, and given that there hasn't been terrific innovation in this space over the years, what are you providing? What does Hazel do that's different? And I know you put a lot of thought into what the company would stand for, how the products would look and feel, and what the experience would be. So help us understand, what is Hazel's approach to dealing with what can often be a very uncomfortable, unexpected, and unenjoyable experience?
Yeah. So, to your point, when we were looking at the market, we knew that, this wasn't just a brand play where you can, develop a better brand. Yes, the existing brands have a ton of stigma associated with them. At the end of the day, the products are flawed, right? I think, there's good reason why the consumers don't want to use them. And, to Alyssa's point, women are actually changing their lifestyle to avoid the category overall, right? Like, the National Institute of Health had estimated that the economic burden of incontinence is about $60 billion in the US alone. And believe it or not, the amount that's associated to like nursing homes is less than 10% of that. It's women that are pulling themselves out of the workforce, changing the way, their active lifestyle, the way they dress, all of that. So when we took a look at product development, we knew that we couldn't just work with the existing players and just put forward, basically the same product. So on our side, we we really took product development and built it from the ground up. So on our side, we knew that, women at the end of the day just want, underwear, right? With some layer of protection. So what we did was we engineered effectively our own fibers, and really brought something new to the space that, looks and feels like actual underwear. It's breathable, yet it has the same absorption capacity as, the legacy brands on shelf. So, for us, that was just really, really important because at the end of the day, while the market itself is already, call it massive in size, I think the biggest opportunity is really serving, the total addressable audience. And, according to our estimates, about 2/3 of women that could belong to the category are refusing to participate.
I have a couple of technical questions for you, again, just stemming from practice. How do these really differ from menstrual underwear, which of course is other than the fact that they're disposable, which makes perfect sense. And number two, how are your products managing what I see every day, which is skin breakdown due to direct contact with urine, which is quite caustic to the skin?
Yeah. So on our side, in terms of, how we're different from some of the, I guess, reusable, period products that have come onto the market. So, a few different ways. So, we're disposable by design. So when we were approaching product development, again, just always bringing it back to the customer, about 93% of women prefer the disposable product, mainly for hygiene purposes. And then the other thing to keep in mind is the segment that we're serving is a totally different audience than those that, are in the reusable underwear segment. So, those consumers are putting, call it sustainability above all else. And, because their technology is reusable from an absorption standpoint, it only really absorbs, at most 8 teaspoons, right? And to kind of put it into perspective, that basically replaces the liner when, our product's really designed to handle a full bladder's worth. So that's about a cup and a half to 2 cups. Right. It's just a completely different need. And then in terms of, designing for skin sensitivities and all of that, when we were developing all of our, different materials and different fibers, because at the end of the day, while it may seem like just, a garment, it's made up of, call it 8 to 9 different unique materials. There's a lot of complexity that happens in the back end. But, we took product development and just, safety and quality very seriously and made sure that, the team was comprised of that. So we did all of the standard testing that you would within this category, including, RIPT testing to ensure that there were no issues with the product being in close contact with the skin. So, with that are really kind of informed the design of the fibers themselves.
One of the things that's also different about what you're doing is how you have a conversation. This is a topic that I love. Alyssa might even say I'm obsessed with it, that we're creating new conversations. So if we didn't know who we were talking to and we didn't have the technology to deliver to the people who are using Hazel products, what is the conversation now? What are the insights that you're speaking to customers about? Obviously, they know what incontinence is when they experience it. What they might not know is how many different aspects of their life it affects. I think, Alyssa, you gave me the example where you're speaking with someone else, someone who wouldn't pick up their grandchild because they were afraid they would leak. Then you have all the issues associated with concern about odor and everything else in the context of an intimate experience. So what are you saying that's really breaking open this conversation so that people understand more, not only have a better solution, but they understand and can talk about it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, to your point, when you lead with storytelling, right, it always resonates with the consumer. Like anytime we've used, kind of overly medical words like incontinence or anything of that sort, consumers are quick to say, no, that's not me, right? That's someone with a problem is how they label it. Yet when we describe the experiences and share stories like the one that you just shared, almost, call it 9 out of 10 times, consumers are like, no, that's what I experience. That's me. That, I don't experience incontinence. This is something else. And as Aubrey, my co-founder, likes to say, our brand voice is really your best friend in the know. And that's really, really important, especially to, break down the walls, given that, this topic largely for so long has been stigmatized. So, I think some of the legacy brands and, a few folks that have, tried to enter the space continue to lead with stats. And I think stats can be okay, but I think at the end of the day, you're building a consumer brand and you don't want to feel, part of a lab study. So that's just so important. And, just to share a real world example, when we launched, we were fortunate enough to be covered in Vogue. And, the piece really spoke to, just about all the conversations that we're having right now on this call. And the amazing thing was there was a beauty blogger who saw the piece, and she actually, organically wrote about Hazel on her own on her YouTube channel. And if you saw all of the comments on the video, it really just kind of represents what, we're looking to do here, right? At the end of the day, breaking down stigmas with authoritative voices, and really kind of partnering with people that believe in the mission, and are just, advocates for women's health. And the amazing thing is within the comments, you kind of saw everything that we're talking about, which is like, women, like for the first time, were saying, wow, I didn't know solutions like this existed in the marketplace, completely treating the legacy, products out there as for somebody else. Right. And we're actually seeing that within our own data.
For old people. Those are for old people. I said it. So in my practice, listen, most women come in and they're just like, oh my God, Dr. Dweck, I went to the gym and I peed myself. I mean, I can't believe I'm using that phrase on a podcast, but that is what most women say to me. A few of them will come in and absolutely say, look, I'm leaking urine and this shouldn't be happening. My question for you is, how much education are you providing on the site about the subject matter in general? And when is it that you, because after all, it's not a permanent solution to use garments such as this. It's a stopgap, and it's a great one, and it may, help somebody to prevent them from having to have a procedure or whatnot. But how do we cure this? And are you providing information on that, even though it might be very challenging?
Yeah. So on our side, at the end of the day, we always want to make sure that our consumers, are aware of all of the different solutions. So from day one, we launched with an editorial, blog, just really kind of focused on the space itself as well as broader topics. And, making sure that consumers are aware of just all solutions, whether it's, pelvic floor exercises, going about the surgical solutions and all of that. And
I'm talking more about lifestyle because, again, when we think about some of the risk factors, one of them clearly being weight management,
right.
Is this something that's addressed, or is that just off base and you're just going to provide general education? And I understand that so many consumers who feel loyal to a brand such as Hello Hazel would really turn to your, customer service, maybe for actual advice. What do I do now? How can I make this better? So, in office, we talk about Kegel exercises, Kegel exercisers, maybe Kegel weights, maybe some of the biofeedback tools, pelvic floor physical therapy, weight management tools, along with these great products. So I'm guessing that your community speaks about this.
Yeah. So right now, outside of the, call it general, content education, we do have plans in place where, at the end of the day, we don't want to just offer, call it a customer service agent, right? We want to make sure that we are the, call it one-stop solution where you can feel empowered. Not to share too much, but we have plans on, outside of just getting access to product, you also get access to, education via pelvic floor therapists, and other medical professionals to make sure that, at the end of the day, they're well aware of their solutions.
That's amazing. I think that would really, really resonate with that population of women. Here's today's hot flash. So per an article published in Obstetrics and Gynecology, the economic burden of urinary incontinence for women is overwhelming at $900 billion.
What would you say to people who are building businesses, not just in incontinence, but I would say other categories that I won't use the S word because it just drives me crazy, but in categories where not the folks on this call and the folks in our community who are uncomfortable talking about it. And you're sort of facing some headwinds. And then, as you said, you come in as a young man in a category that people might not associate you with. What have you done? What tools have you used, personal or technical, to sort of fight those headwinds?
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, it's going back to the customer always, right? You can't make assumptions on what you think the customer wants. So from day one, whether it was one-on-one interviews and, involving the demo, from the get-go, but also doing, third-party surveys and, just making sure that you're kind of covering all bases. I think that's very important, right? Like at the end of the day, while we're not the demo has been involved from the get-go. And that's just, I can't stress that enough. And, I think the world that we live in from a digital perspective, you can get a really good pulse on what's working and what's not. For instance, when we were developing the brand, developing even what the product looked like, we honestly just launched different mock-ups of the website. Also use that as a way to kind of inform ultimately what the brand name would be. And we saw what resonated, right? Nowadays you can easily turn on, a landing page, put some marketing dollars behind it and see how, real customers would react. So, making sure that, again, you get rid of any biases that you may have is probably the most important thing.
So I have to ask, why Hazel? Where did that name possibly come from? I always think of the TV show, but there I go dating myself again.
I think that might have predated Steven just by a few days.
Yeah, I know.
We do get that a lot. I will say, after hearing that, I had gone back and listened or watched a few episodes on YouTube.
Sounds very tone deaf now, right? 30 years later.
Yeah. Even in color? I don't even know.
No, it's in black and white. Yeah. So when we were just developing the brand name, at the end of the day, we knew that we wanted to, we wanted to be a name so it could personify something much larger, and not be some of the names that you hear out in the marketplace today. Some of the legacy brands, right? They're a bit sterile, to say the least. So we knew that just talking to consumers, having, a persona was really important. So we drew inspiration from a lot of names and, our own lives, and Hazel made it to the list. And to be honest, when we were, just seeing what resonated with consumers, we put it out to the world. So we developed different landing pages with different names, and time again, Hazel always won. We saw that, the best engagement, the highest conversion. And this is where you balance what customers tell you and what they also do, right? Because sometimes, those aren't aligned. And in this case they were, but that's how we've, approached company building from day one. It's just, taking a very data-centric approach.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us and for making such great strides in this category, making it safe to go outside. We wish you continued success, and we can't wait to see what's next from you and the Hazel team.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for just letting me get on your platform and share more.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast at businessofthev.com for the latest trends and trendsetters in women's health and business.